Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to the people who make this possible for you with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. So this is kind of a weird little episode in the sense that I was thinking about it in terms of like some occasional commentary I see about Taylor Swift where people say, well, I don't really like Taylor Swift's music, but I think this particular other thing she does that's not music related is cool. And it's kind of a similar idea in the sense that I am enjoying The Acolyte. I really am, like, just across the board. I'm definitely enjoying it. But there are a couple things that just aren't quite sitting right with me, and I've shared a couple of those things from episode to episode on the podcast as we've been talking about the show. But with the completion of the 7th episode, which is entitled Choice, it's the one that shows what really happened on Brendok all those years ago, I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, this is what it is that has been bothering me overall with the particular way that this series, this season has been told. It's kind of a similar thing to what we talked about with season 3 of The Mandalorian, where it seemed like the way that they laid the season out and with the different directors they had coming in to direct the different episodes, it was a little bit tonally out there in terms of, shifting from episode to episode, but also it was taking chunks of storytelling where in a lot of normal seasons, if you will, normal seasons of, television storytelling, you might intersperse elements of, one part of the story and another part of the story and another part of the story across multiple episodes. But say, for example, in the case of season 3 of The Mandalorian, we got everything that happened with Dr. Pershing all in one episode, and ordinarily that could have been spread out and told across multiple episodes, but it seems like the reason why that's not the case is because they have all of these different directors coming in to direct individual episodes. And I was feeling pretty confident about that assessment, thinking also about the Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries, where all 6 episodes were directed by Deborah Chow, so it had a very cohesive feeling. And even thinking about Andor, right? Even though there were multiple directors, the director was the same for particular story arcs, and so it definitely felt like there was cohesiveness there. And in those 3 episode story arcs, they were jumping from place to place to place to place with, different people's parts of the story, and, it still felt cohesive. But then I looked at the directors for the Ahsoka series, and everything jumped around between directors, basically. And we had scenes with different characters in different places in multiple episodes in a row with different directors in a row. And so it's entirely possible to do that sort of thing. And which brings us to where we are with The Acolyte. So The Acolyte is turning out to be basically 4 pairs of episodes, with Leslie Headland directing the first 2 episodes, then Kogonada directing the 2 Brendok episodes. Alex Garcia Lopez directs the day and night episodes that take place on Kofar, and Hanel Culpepper directs Teach Corrupt, that was episode 6, and then what will be its in-universe direct follow-up, whatever the title of episode 8 is going to be. And the other puzzle piece I want to add to this is that in interviews prior to the release of the series, folks were talking about the series having a Rashomon-style kind of layout to it, and that the story would be like a spiral or like having layers that are peeled back, and so you learn more and more about the story as things go on. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, really briefly, Rashomon is a classic Japanese movie which is based on a much older Japanese novel, and it is about a samurai and his wife who are met by a bandit in a forest, and there are varying accounts of what actually happens that results in the bandit killing the samurai, possibly, or maybe the samurai killing himself in dishonor, the wife disappearing, and then subsequently being found and questioned by the police. The whole idea of the story is that truth is kind of a relative thing, that everybody has their perspective on what may have happened, and no one really knows for sure what the truth is. But now in media, there's a thing that is referred to as the Rashomon effect, which is sort of, a simplification of what Rashomon was doing, which is the idea that you can tell a story in multiple ways or show different perspectives, but ultimately the last version of the story that you tell is the quote-unquote truth of the story. Now, with all that set up, here's where I'm actually trying to get to in this episode of the podcast. So, the way that the story evolves in The Acolyte, we have May encountering Master Indara, and this is an opportunity for the story to give us Master Indara's perspective, or at least part of Master Indara's perspective on what happened all those years ago on Brendok, and then, giving us the end result of May killing her, and then, the Jedi responding and so forth, and then eventually May getting to Master Torben, and once we meet Master Torben, we can hear from Master Torben's perspective what happened on Brendok that fateful night. So we could get another piece of the story. And then when it comes to Kelnaka, we could do the same thing. And we don't necessarily have to get full tellings of the story from Indara or Torben or Kelnaka and their reasons they could have in the story to interrupt the conversations, like the fact that the Jedi were on to May when she showed up on whatever that planet was to go after Torben. Olega, that was the name of it. Olega, yeah, right? So she could get part of the story from Torben, but ultimately, the Jedi show up and cause problems and so on and so forth. That kind of structure to the series would have given us the layer peeling episode by episode that we seem to have been promised at the outset, but really we haven't gotten that. We've only gotten the idea of foreboding that something didn't go well with whatever they're talking about all those years ago. We get one telling of the story, and then we realize we're not seeing the whole thing because it's being told from Osha and May's perspective, and then we get a different telling a little bit later in the series. And I think the reason why it couldn't happen this way is because of the way that they decided to deploy the different directors for this season. Like, maybe it's just something weird with how directors get credits on things, right? Like, how would it have worked if, for example, episode 2, Revenge Justice, right? That one was directed by Leslie Headland. And from a storytelling perspective, if you had Master Torben reflecting on what happened on Brendok or sharing some of his perspective of what happened on Brendok all those years ago, but Kogonada directed that aspect of the story, then you're mixing in material from two different directors. Maybe, you've got some voiceover happening possibly as well. I'm still enjoying the series though, and I'm very excited for the season finale. It's just that structurally, the way that the season has been delivered to us so far, it doesn't seem to be fulfilling this idea of, peeling layers back like an onion, or a Rashomon style of delivery of the story. That's been a little disappointing and kind of feels like a missed opportunity, but that's my opinion on the subject. I'd love to know what you think about this. So please, if you're catching this on YouTube, comments are right there. If you're catching it on Spotify, there's a Q&A section over there. Let me know what you think. And if you're catching this anywhere else, then head over to the blog post for this show's episode at sw7x7.com and let me know what you think. And that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please help me get it out to more people who might like to add this dose of Star Wars joy into their lives. You can do that by just telling people in person or online, by telling the algorithms with your likes and comments and your subscribes and follows and joins and all that fun stuff. And you can even help me as an independent creator keep producing this podcast, and you can learn more about that at patreon.com/sw7x7. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyrighted by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.